Hello, Gravelers. Welcome to Mastering RPI, Chapter 1, Lesson 3, the RPI environment. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the three key environmental factors you're going to have to deal with at Rebecca's Private Idaho: elevation, wind, and dryness. Let's start out with the one that's probably most on your mind: elevation. The courses at Rebecca's Private Idaho range, they're an elevation of between 6,000 and 9,000 feet, give or take a couple hundred feet. And yes, that is going to impact your performance and should impact your prep, planning, travel, all those things. Now, how do you prepare for that? Let's just say you had the best possible answer, you had unlimited resources to execute that answer. Really, the idea, the physiological principle of specificity is what you should be focusing on. So if you want to perform at altitude, you need to train at altitude. So the best answer is to execute altitude camp and then show up, arrive in plenty of time to acclimate to the altitude before the event. Now, the reality is most of us won't have the resources, time, and other things to do that unless you're professional, racing professionally. So another alternative, and you're going to have to do the research on this, is heat training. Heat training has been popular in the last couple of years. As a coach, I've utilized it for multiple years. It does increase body plasma and has some positive impacts on hemoglobin, both of which will prepare you for performance at altitude. Now, heat training can be a little tricky. Do the research, find good protocols for heat training, execute with caution, but it could help you prepare, again, by increasing plasma volume and a little bit of hemoglobin. Now let's talk about probably one of the key impacts that the average rider can typically impact: when you arrive. Now, I say typically impact, it might not fit great in your plans, but I'm going to give you the actual hard science behind it. And I'm going to do so by giving you a good, better, best style approach. So the good, right? The good, not the better or the best, but the good. And to be honest with you, it's kind of the worst, but it is the reality for so many of us. The worst impact is to arrive a few days, let's say 3 or 4 days before your big event day. That's the worst. Here's why. When we think about the impact of elevation, going to elevation, and therefore the impact of altitude, the reality is you have this acute and this, let's call it chronic event that goes on. You show up for about the first 12 to 24 to 36 hours. It really depends on you. Actually, it's unique to you. Your body really doesn't notice the stress. It's not having the negative impacts of the altitude yet. So you have this little window of really not being that impacted by the increase in elevation. Now, once you get to about 24 to 36 hours and out to about 10 days, that range is where you're actually most impacted. You have these acute impacts hitting you. You're suddenly at elevation. You haven't acclimated enough. You've accumulated a little bit chronic 4 or 5, 3, 2 days at that elevation, and your body's under a lot of stress. You're usually not sleeping well. Your immune system is responding. Your resting heart rate is elevated. Your respiratory rate will be elevated. So the bad news is that window somewhere of about 24, maybe you could push it to 36 hours to about 10 days. That's the worst time you can compete. Why is that bad news? That's about 90% of us, right? That's how we go do our events. We go a couple of days early, we prep for a day or two, we have fun. Is what it is. If you're there to win and do your absolute best, I'll give you a better and best answer. If you're there to have fun and perform well, don't stress it too much. I'm just giving you the honest science answer. Okay, the better answer is arrive as close to your start event as possible. Because if you listen to what I just said, you really want to race before that impact starts adding up and really having an effect on the system, the impact being increased stress due to that environment. So if you show up, what I'll do with a lot of my racers traveling all around the world, when they go to elevation events, I don't want them going there with the team a couple of days early. I want them getting 12 hours early, 6 hours if they could. And often travel is too barrier, but the shortest amount of time before the race start as possible. That's the better answer. The best answer is a tough one. Most of us don't have this time, and it's kind of like altitude training, right? You should arrive 10 to 14 days before the event to let you begin to acclimatize. You kind of go through acclimation in phases. and you'll get through first phase in around 10 to 14 days. One quick tip for all of these: make sure you're not iron depleted in other things. Having good iron, and don't go out and poison yourself with iron now that Coach Tim said it, but make sure that you're taking a small amount of iron supplements, you're eating well in a well-balanced diet. Having iron and B vitamins in your system can speed that up, help you acclimate a little faster. Impact planning, let's talk about that. How much does this impact going to elevation being this? How does it impact your pacing performance? Well, I'm going to show you specifics on the next slide, but it has a pretty big impact. Actually, about, for most of us, like coming from sea level, about 10%. You should plan on 10% less power, not necessarily 10% less speed, but 10% less power. Finally, do I need to make any nutritional adjustments at elevation? Yeah. Actually, one of the things that happens to you is you decrease your utilization on fats and you'll increase your utilization on carbs. So you want to eat up a little in carbs. You want to pick up your carb intake, I don't know, 5%. Not a big deal. Don't go crazy, but just know you have a little bit more. And finally, your sweat rate's going to change. I'm going to talk about that in the dryness. So you want extra fluid. Like, everyone pretty much knows that is good common sense. You go to elevation, you need to drink more and take in more electrolytes, but I'm going to go into that deeper. Let's go back and talk about that impact. In the article below, I put this chart in the article below so you can see it better, so you don't have to like freeze your frame right now and see it. This is a cumulation, I think Joe Friel put these together, of different studies of the percentage of power retained when you go from sea level to a certain elevation. Most of it, if you look at, I put it in kind of the orange box there. If you look at those numbers at what it is, well, we can say that's roughly about a 10% loss in power. So if you have a 200-watt threshold and you're basing like a pacing strategy based on that 200-watt threshold, plan on it being about 180 watts up at RPI. So really about a 10% reduction in your power pacing strategy. Now, I'll give you a little tip. In a lot of this course, that doesn't mean you'll be 10% slower. The air is thinner. You're a little faster at thinner air. So you do get a little give back in the speed. Okay, let's talk about the wind. What are these impacts from winds? One of the things that surprises a lot of people when they go to RPI is the afternoons particularly are always windy. And the way the courses are laid out, at least two of the courses, you are going to be facing tailwind earlier and headwind back. And headwind back is like one of the tougher things to deal with, both physically and mentally. So let's go back and talk about training preparation. You need to do some specific training in your work, what I would call neuromuscular manipulation. A lot of people would call like cadence drills, but that's not accurate. And here's why: you need to do more force work. When you have a headwind versus a tailwind, particularly, but when you have a headwind, there's more air resistance. When things are pushing back against our need to move forward, it impacts how we pedal because it forces us to make more complete circles, just like climbing a steeper grade. That's why training into a headwind is like climbing, because you need to pedal a more rounded force. You're not applying more force necessarily. A watt is a watt, but you're doing it more around the downstroke. You start a little early up top and you finish a little lower down below. So if you don't train that muscular engagement, which a lot of people would say is strength, but really is more about coordination, if you don't train that muscular engagement, you might not be prepared for the extended headwinds here. So you need to add some big gear intervals, some low cadence climbing, some low cadence headwinds, if you have them, is perfect, some low cadence work. So you're prepared to make those more forceful circles. And I don't mean harder by forceful, but applying more force to more of the circle. Now, as part of that specificity, some people will go, I just heard Coach Tim say, go do big gear intervals and you do them every day. No, that actually would be a mistake. As you add, if you're just now, particularly late in the game, adding some force, some big gear intervals, make sure you counter that with some high cadence intervals. So you're also prepared for the tailwind where your pedaling tends to be more punchy. You're just making maintenance power. You're not as forceful around the whole circle, and the neuromuscular engagement is a little faster. So make sure you practice both. If you're going to go down, all training is a cost and a benefit. The benefit of big gear training is you're a little more forceful in your stroke, but you're going to slow down your neuromuscular power. So practice both. And gearing, I get this question all the time. What should I do in gearing? Gearing's individual. It's how your bike's set up and what you're doing. But here's some good advice. Don't grind into headwinds until fatigue forces you to. You're better off maintaining your average good cadence in headwind until the fatigue really starts piling up, because that'll keep more stress on your cardiovascular system, which will recover well, and less stress on your muscular skeletal system, or your muscular neuromuscular system even, but your muscular system here. You want less stress on the muscular system. It won't recover as quickly. It would need more rest when it fatigues. So in reality, what you need to do is keep your cadence a little higher early. Once you really fatigue out, dropping down to some lower RPMs, that's not a bad answer, but just know that lights the fuse to total fatigue. Race strategy impact. Let's go back to our good, better, best. Good is stay on your power pacing plan or your heart rate pacing plan. Don't get lured by miles per hour. Like, wow, I feel like I'm going too slow. I need to go faster. Stay on your plan. That's always a good core strategy. Better and best are probably the obvious that most of you will know. Better is work in groups and take as much advantage of the draft impact. Heading home into the headwind on baked potato and French fry, groups are so important to find to work with, or you're just going to work harder. The best answer is find faster groups. The faster the group, the bigger. Oftentimes we see a faster group and we're like, I don't think I could hold them. Give it a shot. Because what happens there, the draft benefit of sitting in, you getting the draft, not the person working up front, they're making a bigger pocket in the air. You're getting a little higher impact the faster and faster they go. So you might find you're capable of doing that. Aerodynamic impact, let's say you are working alone or you plan on pulling one of those faster groups, you do want to think about aerodynamics. And in the headwind, it's more important than ever that we're aerodynamic. And there's no downside for tailwinds. You're still getting a gain by being more aerodynamic in a tailwind. But in a headwind, the number one rule is get this thing out of the wind. When you look at studies and how aerodynamics work, getting your shoulders and heads down and lower in the profile have a significant improvement on aerodynamics. When you're fighting headwind, get that noggin out of the way, lower it into your shoulders and lower your shoulders. Now, point number two, you can do that by going into your drops. And most of us are comfortable enough riding our drops in time blocks of 10 to 15, maybe even 20 minutes. Great. You want to be in there and you want to get your head down. Don't forget to look up and stay safe. Don't get me wrong, but get your head down. Now, an even better position, if you're capable of managing, is hands on the tops, but with bent elbows, because your hands being lower are picking up some air. They're making some dirty air in what's known as the cup here. But as you get to your tops and you're still holding on to your tops, but your elbows are bent like you're in the drops and your head's down, that's a pretty aerodynamic position and worth trying to make a little power in. Final point is a little equipment. It is worthwhile when I review these courses on three of the four courses, and that's including Queen Stage 1 and Queen Stage 2, worrying about your aerodynamics or putting a little thought or a little extra thought into aerodynamics will help you. So I might think about my equipment choices as part of this aerodynamic selection. I'd go with a slightly more aerodynamic wheel. And I say slightly because there's such a range in gravel, but here I would use an aerodynamic wheel. A 303 style depth would be really good for the right person, the right strengths, maybe even out to like a 404 kind of depth. Going beyond that probably isn't worthwhile and you have handling problems in that wind, but a 303, so a little bit of depth here in your aerodynamics, maybe even a little more than you might think would be worthwhile. Your overall time, even though you're going a little heavier, your overall time will be better. Second, and I know this kind of sometimes goes against the gravel approach of this type of an event, things like aerodynamic helmet and even thinking about the aerodynamics of your clothing will all help you deal with that headwind. Now, it's not going to make the headwind easier. You're just going to go a little faster. All right, let's talk about the dryness and wrap this lesson up. The positive of how dry it is actually is faster evaporation due to that air dryness, so it will improve your thermoregulation. You have an easier time staying or keeping your body cool at elevation, and that's really important. One of the things that people don't think about in their clothing strategy, which Rebecca goes over as part of this course, is if you're overheating, you're taking a bad situation and making it worse. If you have too many clothes on and you're too hot, that's a bad situation going worse. Same kind of reality if you're too cold, but let's not go there. But what you do want is proper thermoregulation. Hydration plays a significant role in that. Because you're faster evaporating, you're using faster, you're depleting water in your system quicker because you're just sweating more. The sweat rate is higher. And and I'm going to put this in air quotes, your faster sodium electrolyte depletion. The reality is your sodium depletion is really set by genetics. Your glands are only going to let a certain amount out, but your water will go up and you'll be putting out your maximum amount of sodium, and that combination can get you in trouble. Strategy, pretty simple right here. If you're thirsty and starting to drink, you're already too late. Drink more, and drink more. And while you drink more, make sure you have electrolytes in that process. You're taking in an appropriate amount of electrolytes to create that balance of hydration, good hydration. Finally, and these two kind of work together, have a consumption target plan. And what I mean by that is, no, you're going to have one bottle every 45 minutes, one full Camelback every 90, whatever that is, your strategy, but have one so that you get in the proper hydration. But here's the trick, right? Practice drinking. I can't tell you the number of people who I see show up at the finish line with full bottles, and I'm like, why didn't you drink that? And they're like, oh, everybody was going too fast. I couldn't get my bottle out. Practice your drinking as part of your training. What is the easiest way? If you eliminate barriers, like I just couldn't get my bottle out, or the bottle was too big, or whatever, and I'm better with a Camelback. Camelback might be heavier, but easier for you to drink. Create a plan and then practice your plan. And when your plan is easy to execute, wow, like I could drink easily on any surface in some single track and fast up, whatever it was, I could drink. Then you're ready to deal with the dryness. Excellent. Thanks for coming to today's lesson. Talk to you soon.